Everyone. I am so happy to be with you guys tonight and have the chance to introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Dedrick Sims. Dr. Sims is currently the Chief Executive Officer of the Sims Fayola Foundation, whose mission is to improve the life outcomes of urban males. This mission is accomplished through developing and designing charter schools, partnering with school districts and leaders to increase their capacity to serve young urban men, and creating national forums to discuss the impact of school, community initiatives, and legislation on the success of young men. Dr. Sims has been in the education space for over 20 years in a variety of roles and is also the author of 2 books, as well as numerous professional articles. Dr. Sims uses his experience to build the capacity of others to serve students with informed excellence. We are extremely excited to have Dr. Sims back again to speak about the real causes of male violence. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Dedrick Sims.
Clap, 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 clap. That's what's up. That's what's up. Hey, it is so good to see you guys. Let me ask a question because I was trying to go through the pictures to see whether or not is this a new crowd? Deborah, is this a new crowd from the past? Partially.
No, well, you've got a number of new people that are on here, but there are some new folks. I mean, there are some returning people as well that have been with us for a while, but there are a lot of new ones on this call. So
Yeah.
many of them have not been through any of your sessions, but a few of them have.
Yeah, I recognize some faces, but I see a lot of new faces. So I was wondering, just how crazy could I be? That's it.
You can be as crazy as you like.
Listen, thank you for those of you who have joined me in community before. It's good to see you again. For the newbies, it's good to welcome you into community. And I'm excited about the conversation that we're going to have today. Before we get started, there's a couple of things. I'm going to ask you questions. I want you to think about it. For those of you who have sons, I want you to think about. I'm going to ask probably 3 or 4 of you guys. What is one win, WIN, that you've had with your young man over the past week? Just think about that, right? What is one win that you've had, WIN, with your young man over the past week? And I'm going to call about 3 or 4 of you, but before you do, I know it's good evening over there, but it's good morning here. I'm actually in Italy right now. I'm in Tuscany, in Italy, celebrating the big 5-0. This is the 3rd week of celebrating, and so I'll be headed back to Denver on Thursday. And I hear I'll be flying into a snowstorm, but we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, it is 1 o'clock in the morning over here, so it's 1:14. So I'll be up to 3 o'clock and whatever. So the good thing is I'm used to it, right? When I first came over here, it took me a week to get acclimated. If you've traveled internationally before, like this far, like raise your hand or do something, give me a thumbs up or something like that. Yep, I see some hands. And I don't know how long it took you to get together, but it took me a week to get together. For the first week, I was up every morning, 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning, like every morning. I could not go to sleep. I'm reading books and, anyway. So this week I finally got a chance to go to sleep on time, and it's almost time to go back home. So we'll see how the recouping is being done. All right, so I'm gonna call on about 3 or 4 of you guys and ladies. Thank you for all the happy birthdays. To ask that question. What is one win, WIN, that you had with your young man this week? And if you didn't, you don't have a young man, just don't if I call on you, just say, I don't have a young man, and we can go from there. So, well, to keep me from doing that, give me a thumbs up if you have a young man. All right. Jasmine, let's talk about this. And everybody else keep. All right. Well, you have twice the story. So Jasmine, what is one win that you've had with your, first give me his name, grade, and then go for it.
So my oldest is Kingston, like Kingston, Jamaica. He just turned 11 and he's in 5th grade, getting ready to go to the 6th grade. Kingston. So I came up with a win for him pretty easily. He has pretty severe ADHD and some emotional regulation things going on, and we have been really kind of struggling and butting heads over that. And he has what we kind of term fits that can be quite destructive and sometimes violent. And within the last week, he kind of had the elevation of one of those happening, and he was really able to regulate, and something that typically would turn into something really big and explosive and harmful for our household did not turn into that. And so that was just a really huge win for him and for all of us to see him start to use some of the tools that we've been really working on to stay in control of his anger and then lashing out. He sorry, I'm probably speaking too long. He does he gets upset, feels shame, and doesn't like feeling the shame. So then he lashes out in anger to kind of try to minimize what he's feeling internally. So he was able to kind of stop that, which was great. My other kiddo, Kenai, like the Kenai Peninsula, he's 8. I'm having a harder time thinking of one for him. I would say in general, he's been doing a really good job of kind of like reflecting where he can do better in school. He's got a 3rd grade class where there's a lot of behaviors, and he's not quite part of those behaviors, but he's doing better at reflecting on what he can do to kind of not add to that, but be more of the solution for his teacher side. So yes, sorry, that was a really long answer.
No, those are two good wins, and somebody on the screen probably is thanking you right now for going over, because I may not call him. So, but I'm going to keep going. So thank you for that. Nasambi, did I pronounce that right?
You did. Thank you.
All right.
I have one son. His name is Maye. I had his teacher call me on Friday, and he had me on speakerphone for the whole classroom to let me know that Maye had did a phenomenal job with the substitute teacher. And he said he would like a whole classroom full of Maye. So that was positive for me, because I've been having a interesting few weeks with my son where he's been having some behavioral issues. So the teacher said reward him.
Okay. No, that's good. That's good. I think more teachers should do that. Some of the teachers I work with around the country, I always tell them, never underestimate the power of making a positive phone call home, right? It can seem so trivial, but it can change the relationship between a teacher and a student in a minute, right? It could really change that. Who else? I'm gonna get one more who said that they had a son. What about Christy Cordova?
My son's name is Dace. He's in 8th grade. He actually did some chores this week, and I didn't have to ask without me asking or pleading or begging. So he has a very hard time wanting to do those things, even though he doesn't have a lot to do. But yeah,
Okay.
So that was a win.
All right. We take these wins when we get them. So thank you guys so much for entertaining me for a minute. And I did that because I think it's important that, kids can go through these adolescent phases, and especially boys, to where they're just really tough to kind of understand, get to know. We'll talk a little bit about why that may be today. But when we can think about the things that they do well and that they have done well for the week, and to, like the teacher, right, give that phone call home, give them that proverbial phone call by acknowledging what they've done, it can propel them to do that more, right? It's sort of like social training, right? It's like, let me reinforce and talk about the behaviors that I want and that I see, and then ideally you'll continue to do those things. So we have to think about that and stop in the moment. I know it gets tough sometimes, but if we can give them an attaboy, shout them out, for something, that's right there, a positive reinforcement, then that could definitely help drive the behaviors that you want to see. So today, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen and start talking about what we're going to talk about. Let me get this together here. Here we go. And feel free to put your questions and things in the chat. Melissa is watching that for me, so she'll let me know. But today we're going to talk about the real causes of male violence. And so this is going to be true for your kiddo as well as true for any man in your life. Okay? Real causes of male violence, true for any kiddo and also true for any man in your life. Once again, I am Dr. Dedrick Sims of the Sims Fellow Foundation. We are also now the backbone organization for My Brother's Keeper Denver. So if any of you are familiar with My Brother's Keeper, which was President Obama's signature initiative in 2014 that he launched nationally after the death of Trayvon Martin and said, hey, we need communities to commit to protect young men of color across the country so that they also can have the ability to live out their lives and make their futures look like their dreams. And so he made a call to about 200 cities, and Denver was one of the first city that actually accepted it. And so this year is the 10-year anniversary for My Brother's Keeper nationally, but it's also the 10-year anniversary for Denver's My Brother's Keeper. And last year in March, outgoing Mayor Michael Hancock saw fit for My Brother's Keeper to be transferred from the city under the city umbrella to the Sims Fellow Foundation. So we are now the backbone organization for MBK, which means that we are responsible and we are leading the charge on creating a local action plan to support young men and boys of color from cradle to college to career across 6 milestones, convening multiple sectors around young men and boys of color. So it's a pretty big job, pretty big deal that we are excited about it. And this conversation that we're having today fits right into the work that we're looking to do for MBK. All right. So, but before we get started, I'm going to give you kind of this context of where we're going to go. We're going to talk about some historical things. We always got to set it up, right? We just can't jump into it. We got to set it up so you guys can understand exactly where we're going with this, get some context, and really understand the language moving forward. So let's start here. So the issue is that men are more likely than women to perpetuate nearly all types of interpersonal violence. We're talking about intimate partner violence. We're talking about murder. We're talking about assault. We could be talking about rape. That men are more likely to do those things than women. Not that women don't do them, it's just men are more likely to do so. And we're going to talk about why that's the case. Our journey today, this morning, this evening for you guys, is that we are going to look at some theories that talks about violence, and we've examined how gender norms, right? What are the expectations for a gender, whether you're female or male, including social constructions of masculinity. I need you to let that sit with you. Social constructions of masculinity. That means that society has constructed what it means to be a man. I call it American seasoning in America's case, right? Like America says, this is how you should be as a man. You should be a provider. You should, get a job that pays for everything. You should, do this, should do that. And so there's these expectations from society that you need to live up to. And we're saying that gender norms and social constructions of masculinity. Now, this is going to be really important for you parents, especially for you who have younger kiddos. Like, this is really important. This conversation today is putting you ahead of the curve. I'm giving you the cheat code. That gender norms and social constructions of masculinity, they are at the root of most physical violence perpetuated by men against women and against other men. And our goal today is to recognize those things. We're going to recognize the commonalities found across different types of violence, right? Different types of violence, and we're looking to find a more long-standing solutions to violence prevention. One of the things that the research says is that researchers and academia have pigeonholed or segmented or segregated types of violence. You have intimate violence, you have youth violence, you have this kind of violence. And so while that in itself is good for study and research, the issue is that we've also compartmentalized the solutions. We're making the assumption that the solution for intimate violence is not the solution for youth violence. And so when you do that, there's a whole lot of things that you miss. And this is happening today. Like, this is happening right now. If you go to any youth violence counselor or any violence counselor, they will segment this. And what that does is leave a whole lot of things out. So I'm going to show you what the problem is with that. I'm going to show you, we're going to do a deep dive in some theory. So you're going to feel like you're in class today. You're going to feel like you're in college. So if you like school, tonight's the night, right? You're going to feel like you're there. But I'm going to give you some information to walk away that's going to help you with your sons, your nephews, your husbands, your partners, any male in your life. But I want to give you what I call bricks first. There's a couple of words that we need to cover so you won't get lost in the conversation, right? The first word is epidemiology, right? Epidemiology. Now, epidemiology is the study of determinants, right? Which what determines something, right? The occurrence. Let's use COVID-19 since it's the most recent thing, right? The study of what determines COVID-19, how often and where does it happen, and how does it spread? So that's determinants, occurrences, and distribution. So when you think about violence, how does it happen? When and where does it occur? And how does it spread? So epidemiology, I want to break that word down for you. So when we come across it later in the presentation, we won't be lost. The next thing is meta-analysis. Now, meta-analysis is the study of studies. The study of studies and then combining them to create a meta-analysis, right? So what we're talking about today is going to be the result of a meta-analysis that I did. We're looking at multiple studies to kind of see how they all interlock and they intersect. Now, before I move on, I want to ask, is there any questions about epidemiology and meta-analysis? And who's heard of these words before? Let me come out of here. Who's heard of these words before? All right. Who's never heard of these words before and have a better understanding of it right now? Got it. Okay. So epidemiology and meta-analysis. All right. Let's go back to it. So in this presentation, we will focus on interpersonal violence. That means that is the intentional use of force against another person, right? So we're talking about the epidemiology of interpersonal violence. People conflict. And that also spills over to your sons. People conflict. And I'm going to show you how you could be potentially contributing to that, right? You could be potentially contributing to that. So let's go back, a little history, right? So in 2002, the WHO first published a report that highlighted over 1 million individuals lose their lives each year due to violence. And in 2012, over 500,000 of these people died as a result of interpersonal violence, and males were disproportionately impacted. 81% of the violence deaths associated with deaths were men. So in many parts of the world, morbidity and mortality from infectious diseases started to go down, but they started looking at, oh, wow, deaths are still going up, but it's not because of diseases. And they recognized it as being homicide and suicide violence. Violence started to become the epidemic. There's the root word of epidemiology right there. So it started to be the epidemic. And in 1983, national government started saying, hey, look, we got to create some sort of panel, committee, department to handle this. Like, we have an epidemiology department, we have CDC, blah, blah, blah. So CDC was established in 1983 to kind of look at this violence. And then in 1996, they started to characterize the different types of violence. Now, these epidemiologists, they define violence as suicides, homicides, child abuse, youth abuse. And as I mentioned to you earlier, that because of these typologies, they started to segment these violences and said, hey, this is this, this is this, this is this. Now, that's the problem. That's the problem. And for example, intimate partner violence and sexual violence are typically grouped together in one field, mostly focused on men violence against women. That's the only one that they combine, but the other ones are still very segmented: partner violence, suicides, homicides, child abuse, youth violence. They're still very, very segmented. Now, youth violence, right? That typically refers to violence between young people, such as bullying, assaults, homicides, and the majority of these victims and perpetrators are men. So I want you to note this. Look at this last statement. Youth violence research and interventions often focus on interpersonal violence perpetuated by at-risk individuals in race and class marginalized communities or in neighborhoods that live at or below the poverty line. I want you to read that again. That the prevailing disposition of the research around youth violence focuses mainly on at-risk individuals in race and class, marginalized communities, or neighborhoods that live at or below the poverty line. Now, Melissa, this goes into our first breakout session. And I want you to, if you could put this statement in the breakout sessions for them to have to look at. But as you go into your breakout sessions for 10 minutes, I want you guys to think about this and have a conversation about what is the problem with this approach? What is the problem with just focusing on at-risk individuals and those who are in class marginalized communities or those who live at or below the poverty line? So for those of you who have phones, you may want to take a picture of this screen, but we're going to ask Melissa to also drop this into the chat as well, or drop it into your groups.
Oh, wait, so I didn't put
So
that in the chat.
Yep, put it in the chat. So again, guys, we're going somewhere. We're talking about the history of this violence because I'm going to land it at your front door here in a minute. But I got to get you to get the context to understand, to deeply immerse yourself in this and see yourself in this so that you can realize that the solution is right there, right? So let's go into the chat, and I want you to have a conversation about why that approach right now by WHO, CDC, leading researchers, epidemiologists, like why is that a problem with that?
Okay, I'm sending them.
Hey, you're on mute.
Hi, can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you. I can see you.
Okay, so I had to leave because my device was dying, so now I used a different device now.
Oh, got it. Okay, so Melissa needs to shift you into a breakout room. Melissa, you there? Let's see here. Blah, blah, blah. Melissa, are you there? Deborah, are you there? Melissa, I can't unmute or turn my camera on. Are you able to still work the breakout groups and move, what's your name?
Ashley, sorry.
Ashley, and move Ashley. Her phone says iPhone, so I didn't know her name. Okay, Melissa says she'll move you. Keep me in this in the main group, Melissa. I was trying to get out of the group I was in, and I completely went out of the whole thing. Did you happen to start a timer? Okay, I can read your thing. Okay, bet. Okay, 6:35. Okay, I'll see you in 6:35 then. I see you figured out your camera situation a lot quicker than I did.
I went back into the breakout room and then came back and it worked.
All right, well,
Yeah, I
glad you
was like,
got
I'm not gonna go back in. I'm just gonna stay right here.
glad you figured it out.
Yeah.
All right.
I think we got
46 seconds.
40, yeah,
Cool. I'm anxious to hear what they come up with.
me too.
I'm drinking this coffee now. I'm afraid I'm not gonna be able to go to sleep.
I wouldn't be able to if I had coffee at 2 in the morning.
I'll be up. I'll be up watching the Andy Griffith.
That's fun. I want to do a 3-week birthday celebration. That's amazing.
Go for it. Go for it. 3 weeks. Feels good too.
I'm sure. That's awesome.
I feel refreshed going back. So
Sometimes you just need it, right?
yep. Do you see that? So do you want to close out the break rooms? Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
I got 10 seconds.
Oh, I see it now. Yep. All right, so we're back. We're back. Hopefully you guys had some hearty discussions and about why that could be an issue. So let me do this. I'm going to you guys are broken up into 6 groups. We got David's group, Sharice's group, Aaron's group, Elizabeth's group, Elias's group, and then Catherine Smith's group. So I'm going to just call on one person from the group, from each group. So we'll have 6 different responses and talk a little bit about what your group talked about what's the problem with that approach. So let's start with David's group. So David, Diana, James, Nikki, Sarah. So why don't you chime in and talk about what you guys talked about?
Hi, I'm Angie, but I'm on my husband's computer. I'm assuming you're talking to me.
I am Angie David.
Okay. We talked a little bit about how there should be more studies in all avenues, not just based on income or location. Like there should be studies all across the board. Because it's not just one group of kids that are struggling, or that show violent tendencies, or that have exposure to violence as well. So I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in from my group, but it's kind of a summary.
No, you're good.
Well, and I liked what Angie was saying too about her experience, that there was the lack of having a father in the home was what put a lot of the kids at risk in the different areas that she's worked in. And that didn't seem like that was part of the studies and what was being addressed at there.
Good point. Good point. Thank you for that. Anybody else from that group? Okay, cool. Let's go to Sharice, Christy, Josh, Kimberly, and Narita. I hope I got that right. So somebody from that group, jump on and let's talk about what did you guys discuss relative to this question?
We just talked about just like how it's not very like accurate information when you just try to base like the information on like, at risk, or different races, in different classes. We talked about how the same crimes are probably happening in different neighborhoods, but the fact that they can't afford like lawyers, things like that, like it's going to make it seem as if, they're doing these horrible things and they're only happening to these groups of people. We talked about how basically how crime happens everywhere, how like even in Colorado, people always say like, oh, I live up north, crimes don't happen up north, and things like that. And just like, that's inaccurate. Like it can happen anywhere. I mean, I feel a little, not the perfect thing to say, but I always appreciate when things happen up north, because it's like, see, like those same crimes can happen anywhere. It doesn't matter like the race or where you live or how much money you make, so different things like that we just talked about.
Good stuff, Sharice. Sounds like you guys had a pretty robust conversation. Anybody else from that group? All right, cool. Let's go to group 3. That's Aaron, Kelsey, Laura, Lene, and Tanya. So somebody from that group. Let's hear how you guys approach this question.
I can answer. I think similar to what Sharice was saying, in the sense of, I mean, initially kind of going like, well, why are they focusing on those areas and those groups? Like, is there a reason behind it? But I guess the side for being upset would be if they are creating that issue, that they're focusing more on it, does it create more bias that, by not looking at the other areas and not creating more numbers, is that kind of perpetuating the problem and just kind of creating more of an issue? But yeah, not seeing where crimes are going on. And like Sharice said, with, is it just because, they don't have that support system and as much that's there to help them kind of navigate the law side of it? So it seems like it's more prevalent when really it's not.
That's a good point. Anybody else in that group? All right, thank you. Let's go to group number 4 here. Elizabeth, Heather, Nancy, Sally, or Wahid. Somebody jump in and let's talk about how you guys navigated that.
So we talked a little bit to you about the perpetuation of stereotypes. I'm sorry, my cat is trying to get involved in this conversation. Sorry about that.
I see you, coworker.
And sometimes at risk is like coded language for trying to target people groups, and that's inappropriate. We talked about how it seems to you that might be jumping in a little bit late in the game too. When you start to identify people as at risk, maybe at that point you're also saying, hey, these are kids that might be prone to violence way after they're in a place where they can receive intervention, maybe. And then we also talked a little bit about our neurodivergent kiddos too, who really need early diagnosis to be able to avoid responding violently to overwhelm too, and how that kind of misses that entire part as well. Just that there's so many different groups that need intervention. It seems unfair to perpetuate stereotypes and also not open it up to groups that might need it elsewhere too.
Yeah, you said a lot of good stuff. That last statement is definitely powerful. So we're going to touch on that here in a minute as well. Room 6, we have, room 5. So we have Eliza, Elizabeth, Angie, Jasmine, Nasambi, and Shayna. Somebody chime in about how you guys approach this question.
I can talk. A lot of the same things that were said before about how it perpetuates stereotypes, how when children of color or poor children commit crimes, they really don't have the same resources that more affluent children do. We also kind of talked about how when children of color do things, they're adultified and seen as like adults, whereas when white children do those same things, they're seen as kids just being kids. We also talked a lot about the historical context of who commits crimes in this country and kind of like through the colonial project, where it was white men perpetrating most of the crime. And so that they kind of just get a pass for all of that. And now we're really focusing in on who are victims of a culture and a system that were set up instead of who are the perpetrators of that victim and culture. And why is that still happening? Yes.
A lot of good stuff in there. A lot of good stuff in there. And by the way, they're still getting passes. No judgment, just data. Okay, no judgment, just data. Anybody else from that group want to chime in? There's a lot of good stuff you said there.
Yes. I just want to share from the teacher perspective. You've spoken eloquently on this, but there's a disparity between the amount of suspensions, expulsions, even referrals, even teacher aggression towards young men and women of color, and then it moves into Asian societies and things like that, and how teachers are harder on boys and girls. And you've spoken again to all of that, and so I just was curious, and I put in the chat, but I found from the Vera Institute that media and society overrepresent young men of color as aggressors or criminals, fueling the misconception that violence and pain impact young men of color less profoundly than others. And I thought, right, speaking to what you were saying about right at the beginning. So it baffles my mind when all this information is available this quickly. Why are we still doing the same things? So thank you for all you do.
You're welcome, and those are really good points. And why do we still do what we do is a really good question, right? I have my thoughts around it, and I'll talk about that. But while we do what we still do, we still getting the same thing over and over again. Guess what? It's benefiting somebody, right? So it's that's why it continues. There's someone that's benefiting from this, right? Before I get on a tangent, let's go to room 6. Ange, Catherine, Valita. Does any one of you want to chime in? Who's going to chime in from that group?
So I can start. I mean, if we were talking, we took it from the aspect that it was a study. So obviously the results are skewed because they excluded a huge chunk of the population. One of the other things that we discussed was assuming that crime doesn't happen in those affluent neighborhoods. It's underreported because obviously if we have a wealthy physician or wealthy senator, they're not going to, if violence is happening, they're not going to want to report it. So those are some of the things that we really just that the results are not accurate at all because it just focuses on marginalized and poor people.
Exactly. You know what? You guys all gave really, really good answers, and you got at the spirit of what I was trying to get you to get at, is that when the research is only focused on at-risk individuals or those who are class marginalized and those who are below poverty, there's an inherent assumption that violence is not happening anywhere else. And when you do that, all of your solutions, i.e. laws being passed, initiatives being passed to stop violence, suspension policies, expulsion policies in schools, all those things tend to target one population or two populations or three populations. Like it's all there. And that's why other people can get passes, because this is not supposed to belong to you. You're not supposed to do this. So I don't know what to do. Like something must be wrong. So let's start a counseling session. Or let's start a program. Let's write a book. Let's do something else to help you. But oh, you guys who are at risk and you are marginalized and you are below the poverty line, you're getting suspended, locked up, expelled because you have the problem. Because I got tons of research that talks about you. That's the issue. That's the issue. Now, I'm going to show you how that being the issue, how that being the targets causes the violence. It adds to the violence. See, listen, the one thing you guys are going to learn about me, for those who don't know me, for those of you who do, is that there's always a reason that something happens. I'm going to drill down to you to show you exactly why these things happen. And again, it's no judgment. It's just data. So if you get mad, you get mad. There's no judgment. It's just data. Take the information. This hot sauce is just hot. I'm not going to judge it. It's just, it burns my tongue. That's just the truth. Let's get back into this. So let's keep going. So the history and current state of this violence. So now when you segment it like this, right? When you segment it like this, you are of a different interventions are often brought up, right? Let's deal with youth violence versus intimate violence versus sexual violence and those things when there's some commonalities to this. So look at this. Evidence-based for interventions used to prevent intimate, partner, and sexual violence. Some of the things some of the solutions that are proposed for this are program addressing gender norms, right? You know, this domestic violence happened because gender norms says that men's supposed to do this. And, you know, I did it because of this. Like she was talking back to me, or a kid could say this girl was trying to bully me, and I had to show her that I was a boy, and so on and so forth. Now, one of the solutions to intimate, partner, and sexual violence is microfinance programs. That was interesting to me. Microfinance programs. I'm gonna come out of screen and ask you this question. Why do you think microfinance was a potential solution for intimate and sexual violence between adults?
I think a lot of that violence comes from financial stress.
There it is. There it is. Now, what did that have to do with being a man?
Nothing.
Nothing. Right? Nothing at all. So there's something else that's underlying. So financial stress. Now, let me ask you a question. Could this same financial stress happen for a K through 12 kid? Can they feel that same kind of stress? Yes? Someone said yes.
I think so.
Tell me how,
I think
Heather.
so.
Tell me how.
Because I think if you're struggling financially, a lot of times kids know, even though, because most of the time parents aren't very good at hiding it. And kids know if they're struggling to have food on the table, or if they can't afford the nicer clothes like some of the other classmates or whatnot. And I think that can, because kids can be mean and they'll bully kids because they can't afford the more expensive clothes, or they're eating free lunches versus, you know, expensive packed lunches or something like that. So I think kids can absolutely feel it.
Anybody else? But you're spot on. You are spot on. So this kid feels embarrassed because he has to eat free lunch. He doesn't have the new Jordans on, or whatever it is they're wearing these days, right? The Vans or whatever it is. He doesn't have those things on. And so why does the violence come from him? Like, he could be bullied, but why does the violence come from him? And it has nothing to do with him being bad or being whatever. Like, why does we're talking about the causes of violence. And what this does for you as teachers and as parents, for those of you who are teachers and educators, what this does is that it opens your mind up for you to have an inquiry disposition, an inquiry stance to say, why is this happening? Why is this happening? See, the reason why this kid can lash out and he's the one that's going without, or she's the one that's going without, is because they can't lash out at you like that. They're angry. They are trying to express themselves in a way that fits their 11, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old mind, right? This is how they express their trauma, their stress. And so this is what the research was saying, right? The research was saying was this, is that when you compartmentalize youth violence with intimate partner and sexual violence, then you miss that there's a connecting thing, and this connecting thing is stress at whatever age level that you're at. Now, what are the implications for that for you as a parent, right? What are the implications for that as you as a parent? The implications are you have to be mindful about the conditions in which you raise your kids and how they live and the conversations and all those things. So you may be getting those calls from schools because of something that you're doing inadvertently. The hot sauce is hot. No judgment, just data. I'm gonna let that sit there for a minute. Is that you could be causing this. You could be contributing to this. The same way teachers, I tell teachers all the time, you guys could contribute, right? You guys can contribute to discipline issues in the classroom and in the school just by how you respond. We're so tied up. Teachers are so tied up in having this hierarchical relationship. I'm the teacher, you're the student. I say something, you get something, I give something, you become passive recipients of the information, and that you don't challenge me. And when I do, when the kid do ask a question or come across as a perceived challenge, then the conflict happens. And then guess what? This kid is sitting in the office for something that they really didn't instigate. I'm not frozen. I'm just letting that sit in there for a second. Because as parents, we can do the exact same thing. So I'm giving you the causes of this violence, like, oh, he's so bad, and why they shooting each other, and why fighting in school. And I'm giving you one cause. That's just one. See, sometimes we gotta, just step back and ask the question and kind of see how we are contributing to this. Let's get back in the screen. And when we think about youth violence, some of the solutions are parent-child programs, social development programs. Now, what does a parent-child program and a social development program have to do with the fact that this kid may be stressed because of the lack of finances in their home? This is the danger of compartmentalizing the things. This is the danger of it, right? And here, this question right here, while the divisions based on the type of violence allow for targeted approaches, right, they omit the examination of risk factors that may exist across types of violence. And we talked about this. I mean, the danger of that is that you miss it. Like you miss a solution. You miss a solution because you think it's so tied to one kind of violence or one kind of person or one kind of community that you miss it. That's the danger in our system as a country.
No, I'm just listening.
Is where I'm going with this. That's the danger. Now, there's that word epidemiology again. So in 2012, over 500,000 individuals died because of interpersonal violence. 500,000. Of these deaths, 81% of them were men. 81% were men. So one can look at that and say, you know what? Men are violent. And that's just who they are. And we're gonna attach violence to them. Men are violent. And you can go no deeper than that, right? That's the same thing we do with communities, especially communities of color. When a narrative is painted about them, some people will go no deeper than that and not really understand why. Don't take an inquiry stance about why this could be happening. In a study of over 27 countries, males were more likely than females to be engaged in fights. And it was 12 or more times in a year was the barometer. Here's another cause, sports, right? Sports, that's a socializing institution of masculinity among men. And it is codified in sports to reward violent behavior between men. Boxing, football, rugby. Now, I'm a huge football fan, got it, but I also understand that you are rewarded for how hard you can hit. You're rewarded for, you can lay somebody out. You're rewarded for all these things. It's just, when you think about being institutionalized, men are institutionalized to be violent in these sports. Now, I play football 2-a-days, you're in the gym, you're being hazed in the gym based on how much you can lift and all these kind of things. And so it is ingrained, especially in athletes, that violence comes with it. Now, a meta-analysis, there's that word again, meta-analysis, a study of studies, showed that athletic participation and fraternity membership were associated with the perpetuation of sexual assaults and rape supportive attitudes, right? Athletic participation. And finally, there is substantial evidence that perpetuates one type of physical violence are more likely to participate in other types of physical violence. Now, this is why the compartmentalization of the therapies of the kind of violence is dangerous. That last statement just said that it is shown that those who can perpetuate violence of one type are more likely to be able to do it on another type as well. So that means that I can do intimate violence, I can do youth violence, I could do murder. Like, it is all one. Then that's the danger of compartmentalizing. Now, what I'm going with this is that as a country, right, we should look, I'm gonna give you a secret. As a country, we are addressing violence therapy all wrong. It's too shallow. No judgment, just data. It's too shallow, right? For those of you who are teachers, it's akin to if a student is not, say, reading at grade level, and you give them assessment and you find out that they have problem with decoding, right? And then you choose to try the best practice around decoding, and that's it. Like there's nothing else you try. That one therapy, that one technique. And if he doesn't get it right, then you throw him away or say he's ineducable or put him in special ed and all those things that happen, right? All things that happen. So don't even get me off on the soapbox about the over-identification of students in special education, especially students of color. Don't even get me on that, right? So that's the same thing could happen with violence. Why are men violent? Why are kids, my boy violent? Like it could be a number of things. And what this does for you as a parent, that if this happens to you, and if you being called into the classroom or the school about your kid being violent, you have information now that you can take in and ask the right questions. Ask the right questions about what happened. But you can also take a moment to self-examine yourself and say, how have I contributed to this? No matter how I may feel, you gotta ask yourself that question, how have I might contributed to this? What's happening in my household? What's happening in our life, financially, socially? Like, are we in an upheaval? Because we all know that the maturation of the brain that moves from emotional to logic happens around 25, 26, and 27 years old. That's when the prefrontal cortex actually matures enough to really rely on its executive functioning. Anything under that is subject to emotional, being led by emotions. So you have a 13, 14, 15-year-old that continues to get in trouble in school, that has violent tendencies, or these things are being associated with them, then they are speaking through that behavior. And you have to ask yourself, what in conditions is perpetuating that behavior? Before you judge him, throw him out, put him in therapy, like you first have to see what in our immediate surroundings is causing this. Have I lost you guys? No, I haven't lost you. Yeah, thank you. I see a whole bunch of heads. I'm telling you now, this is academic stuff, but it's stuff that you need to ground yourself with. I get so excited. Okay, I don't know if you can tell, but I get so excited talking about this kind of stuff because it gives you the foundation. It gives you the reason why. And when you know the reason why, then you can operate with objectivity and not subjectivity. Okay. All right. Going back in. So now let's talk about the factors, right, that cause male violence. Now we're getting deeper now. So when you think about the main risk factors for physical violence, right, and especially those that are associated with more than one type of violence, they are low educational achievement, nonviolent problem-solving skills, impulsiveness, history of violent victimization, witnessing violence. Now we're driving home. Mental health problems, like there are some legitimate mental health problems. And then substance abuse. Substance abuse. Now, when I look at this, one thing stands out to me, and I want to ask you this question. Why would low educational achievement be a risk factor for causing violence? Why would low educational achievement be a risk factor for causing violence? Help me help you. Anybody?
I think somebody put it in the chat, lack of confidence, but also the shame that comes with not being able to achieve. And we don't like shame as humans. So trying to mask that with something else, typically anger leading to violence.
Got it. Eliza?
Sorry, we got the troll movie on in the background, so hopefully you guys don't hear that too much. Just access to resources, right? So the larger your vocabulary, the more effective you can articulate yourself. The larger your social emotional intelligence vocabulary, the more you can say, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm not coming at you. Please, let's just take a deep breath. Let's everybody calm down, slow down. Let's talk about this, right? Feeling, people brought up shame, feeling that you're worthy enough to ask for help, feeling that you're worthy enough to advocate for yourself. When you're in low education, low socioeconomic, well, I've had students say everybody thinks I'm sped anyway, so why don't I act like it? Right? So again, it's that labeling, it's that telling these kids who they are instead of finding out who they are. So I'm gonna stop.
Oh, great stuff, Sarah. That is absolutely great stuff. I'm sorry, Eliza. Sarah, I see you have your hand raised up.
I was just gonna also say, I think that frustration, environmental factors is huge, I think, in the role in which, a child's environment has a lot to do with it. But I think that whenever they're really frustrated, that it's really hard for them to be heard, and the stress of that. And I think that it just causes a lot of conflict in their mind.
Got it. Good stuff. You guys are right there, man. You guys are right there. Let me give you an example. All right. It's okay if I give it's okay if I give you a cultural example. Like, it's okay if I go there. All right. I'm going there anyway. So think about this. So I have a home in New Orleans, right? And New Orleans is a beautiful place. The culture is absolutely wonderful, but it can be sad at the same time. It can be sad because New Orleans has one of the highest poverty rates per capita, just across the country. Like, there's just a lot of poverty there, and it's gotten better since Katrina, unfortunately, because some people were able to leave and were pushed out, but couldn't come back. They couldn't afford to come back. They lost their land. People, they were saying, "Hey, I need you to show papers." Like, what papers? Like, the papers got washed out into the Gulf, and so they lost their land, right? But what I see every morning when I'm in New Orleans is that there's this part of the streets called the neutral ground. Has anyone of you ever been in New Orleans? Raise your hand if you've been in New Orleans before. Get your thumb up or something. So we got one person, two. All right. So there's this thing called the neutral ground. And imagine you have a street going with traffic going this way and a street with traffic going this way. And in between is a patch of land. And that land is filled with trees and so on and so forth. But that's called the neutral ground, right? Historically, it was called the neutral ground because of war. When war was going on, when you stepped in the neutral ground, that was like no war. Like, let's have a conversation, right? But there's no war per se going on in New Orleans, no, that kind of military war, but there is a social war that's going on. And ironically, the neutral ground is filled with people, and it's filled mostly with Black men. I'm not froze, just setting you up. It's filled mostly with Black men, healthy men, young, mostly old, right? I call it the Black Country Club. But so that the country club is right there. Guess what's there? When you stop and have a conversation with those men, and they're up at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and people are driving by saying they could be at a job, they could be getting ready to go to work. You're getting up early enough. Why are you on the corner begging? Like, driving by, making assumptions, right? Making judgments. If you stop and have conversations with those men, you'll find a story with every last one of them who were not able to live their best life, to achieve their dreams, not because they didn't want to, not because they didn't try, but because there were institutional barriers that prevented them from doing so. And they are very, very, very angry. They had low education. We're talking about low educational attainment. They they were told, since you are a Black man, that you could not do this, you could not do that. And when you talk about the human capital that has been wasted and that's sitting in this neutral ground, that's them. So this low educational attainment, to no fault of their own, has limited them from being able to get the careers they want, the jobs they want, the homes they want, to live up to what we call American seasoning. If America says, I need to get a house, I need to get a job to get a house. But if America won't give me a job because of my color, because of whatever it is, then I'm frustrated. Guess what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna fight. Because at that point, what kicks in? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Food, shelter, right? The desire to belong, right? To actualize yourself. So if you can't do that because of low educational attainment, then to your point, to all your points, is that you do get frustrated and you start to fight. You start to fight metaphorically, symbolically, and a lot of time physically. And then guess what happens? People start to put you in this box that you're violent because you're Black or because you're a man or because of blah. People do not go below the surface to figure out what could be wrong. And because education is a social industry, it adopts social ills, ILLS. So just because a teacher is a teacher or a parent is a parent, they're grown versions of the people they're talking to. They may or may not have stormed and normed and dealt with these things themselves. So they bring their own baggage in and they characterize these boys or they characterize these communities based on their limited knowledge, which what I call the law of the lid. You can only go as high as you're able to go. So that's why low educational attainment can be a cause of violence. And when you think about communities of color, you think about how systemically that they have been limited to get education, to make a living wage. Now that's true for a lot of Americans who are not of color, but we're talking about the systemic isolation, the intentionality that went behind that still goes behind that today. No judgment, just data. You can understand why there's a population that they're willing to study and say, we're going to limit it to these folks. But they think the violence is because of nefarious reasons or because of culture, but have they considered, have they stopped to consider that it could be because of policies, it could be because of other things that's causing this to happen, and it's not necessarily that they want to be violent, but it's because it's human nature at this point. I'm frustrated. You told me to go to school to graduate to go to college. I can't go to college now. You told me to go to college to get the job. I finished college, now I can't get the job. You told me to get the job so I can get the house. Now I got the job. I'm trying to buy the house, and oh, by the way, there's a covenant that tells me as a Black person, I can't live there. As a brown person, I can't live there. So I'm scratching. I'm scratching for my humanity. And what do I do with that? What do I do with that? When you see me show up at school and slap another kid, where does that come from? When you see a group, a community that has these tendencies, you gotta say that everybody in this community is not crazy. That there has to be something systemic. Now, for those of you who are upset about CRT, the discussions about CRT, that's what CRT is talking about. No judgment, just data. I'm trying to give you some information. I'm just gonna give you some information. That is, CRT says that there is, in all of our systems, there is a consideration, an inch of racist framework, especially for folks of color. When you think at one point in this country that Black people were considered 3/5 a person, you can't say that this doesn't exist in our systems. Just because that went away don't mean the thought went away. And we see these things play up over and over and over and over and over again. So to answer your question earlier, why are we still dealing with this? This is why. This is why. So the causes of male violence are associated with these things. I don't know if you have a brother, if you have a cousin, if you have a friend that's a guy that's, you know, and they have gotten in trouble, they tend to be violent, they're angry, blah, blah, blah. Like, as we talk about these things, think about their life. Think about their life. I have a brother, and my brother has been, in the last 12 months, he's been in jail, probably 9 of them. And he's angry. Sure, we get frustrated because we have to deal with his stuff, and you know, we get frustrated because he goes to jail, and we feel like we in jail because we got to deal with everything that he's dealing with, because he can't take care of himself at that point. But my brother went through high school in special education. They put him in special education because he had a hearing issue. He couldn't hear because of he's born premature, which means that he didn't hear words correctly. So the way he pronounced words were not the correct way, right? He wasn't articulate and so that limited him from being what he wanted. He wanted to be a mechanic. He's a great mechanic, but he wanted to be like a certified mechanic, open his own shop, the whole nine. But he's not able to do that because people won't give him a chance because they can't understand what he's saying, blah, blah, blah. Like he's angry. He's lashing out at the world because of something that school did to him. But without knowing that information, you're going to say he's an angry guy. He's violence prone. He's like without knowing that, that's what you're going to say. So low educational achievement, nonviolent problem-solving skills, impulsiveness, witnessing violence. I can't tell you, when I was a principal and a superintendent, how many kiddos we got in the office because they had a referral that was associated with violence, but it was because of what they saw at home. They learned to solve problems based on what they saw at home. Kids mimic adults. And so when I say sometimes we can be contributing to the very thing that we're getting the phone call from about. It's true. It's real true.
There's a question in the chat. Do you think that people teaching boys don't be a sissy is kind of a mentality has affected them rather than using their physical selves to react over just emotional reacting?
I'm going to read it for myself real quick. Yeah, absolutely. It does have an effect on them. I mean, it's the classic definitions of toxic masculinity, and we're going to get into this in a few slides. But it's the classic definition of toxic definitions of masculinity. We do this to our boys when we say things. Don't be a sissy. Say it was, put your chest out, or don't cry. What are you crying for? I'm gonna give you something to cry about. Like, we do this because what we do is we teach them not to deal with emotions. Emotions are human. We teach them the wrong way to deal with anger. And then when they have some sort of positive affection, their friends ridicule them for being soft. Oh, you in love. So there's nowhere for the boys to escape, to process feelings the right way, the healthy way. And you'll see it in a slide that's coming up. We teach our boys, the Sims Fielder Foundation, the 16,000 boys that we've impacted over the last 9.5 years, we have a slogan and a t-shirt and a program called "It's Okay to Not Be Okay." We as men highlight our interaction with counseling. We talk about how what's one of the best things that happened to us. The ability to talk to someone to get it out. Because if not, it just boils over. Like, men just become like boilerplates, just waiting to explode in some way. Sometimes it's against another person, interpersonal violence. Sometimes it's a thing. But you're human, so it has to come out. It's going to come out in either stress, which is health related, ulcers, all those kind of things, but not being able to cry to deal with things. So yeah, absolutely, I think that is a horrible horrible mindset to portray. But guess what? Listen, oh, don't miss this. Don't miss this. It's hard to be what you can't see. It's hard to be what you can't see for those who have told this guy that they haven't seen it. So it's the blind leading the blind. I hope you don't miss that. Let me get through it. So now we get into what the cause of violence is. Ample evidence has shown that socially constructed gender norms, look at that, socially constructed, man-made, human-made, community-made, socially constructed gender norms that socialize men to have value hierarchy. I'm the man, I'm in charge, I'm in control, what I say goes. Aggression, power, respect, emotional suppression, which is dangerous, may be the primary root causes of violence-related disparities. Now, there are three frameworks that the research looks at this through: society, interpersonal, and then the individual level. So society as a whole, your community, interpersonal, you between you and another person, and then individual, you within yourself. Let's take a look at this. So in this first one, which is the societal level, this is the inequalities between men and women, and also other men create power hierarchies that facilitate violence. Like, I'm in charge. Why are you talking to me like that? I'm the man. Whether that's to a spouse, a partner, or to a kid. Like, you know what? Just because I'm who I am is the reason why you need to say what I'm gonna do. I saw my dad do it. I saw his dad do it. Like, it's just society. Number two, under this societal level, is that men need to prove themselves as powerful and strong. Society says you must be strong. You're the only one that can open the stuck jar of jelly. You're the only one that can do that. And in this level, men who do not portray or even prove themselves can be victimized. And so they feel like, I got a peacock. I got a peacock, or I'm going to be relegated to a lower social class. Like, people are not going to fool with me. The last one is defending perceived or actual challenges or threat. Like, if I feel like you threatening me, you know, then I got to get violent. Now, how does this relate to you as parents? Because you can create these conditions with your sons and don't even know it. At home, you can create these conditions. If you don't, what I call storm and norm within yourself, examine your own surrounding, you could be reinforcing the very thing that you're getting the call for. Do you ask yourself, do you put your son or your cousin or your nephew in a situation where they got to prove themselves as strong and powerful? Do you say things like, if you get into a fight and you get whooped, you come home, I'm gonna whoop you. If you get beat, I'm gonna beat you. Do you put them in that position? Do you send them to school and say, hey, if someone hits you, you hit them back? Like, do you put them in that situation? So you may not, but there are parents that do. With their best intentions. I don't think any parent goes into it with nefarious reasons. It's just it's hard to be what you can't see. And if that's what you were told, then you're telling what you're told. Individual. When you're dealing with individualism, this is being viewed as a real man. Like, am I a real man by my peers? What does that look like? Am I a real man? The research said that men make themselves, like, we actively construct what masculinity is. in social and in the historical context. So a man in America could be very different than a man over here in Italy. Like it's socially constructed, like we make ourselves. And the last thing is men and women learn how to do gender through a process called socialization, right? At birth, girls are typically given dolls and soft things and pink things and, blah, blah, and blah. And boys are typically given trucks and blocks and hard things and footballs. And like we socialize. We, at the beginning, we as parents tell our kiddos what defines a boy, what defines a girl. And that in and of itself, there's nothing wrong with that. But when you do it in unhealthy ways, and I talked about unhealthy ways to where you encourage your son to prove himself as a man, as a boy, then you eliminate all of the ways that healthy maturation can happen. So we're going to go back into our last breakout group. And the question is, men and women learn how to do gender through a process of socialization, starting at birth and continuing throughout various social institutions in their lives. School is one social institution, church is another social institution, after school sports is another social institution, after school programs, another social institution. Like you get my point. You get the point. And this socialization process can result in men perpetrating violence. So as a parent, what are the implications of that for you? As a parent, what is the implications of that for you? So Melissa, can you put them in groups again?
Yep, there they go.
There they go.
I gotta put Matt, I gotta put you in one.
Hey, Matt, how are you doing, man? He's gone.
Monday. I'll put her in 3. Okay.
All right. Well, I'll see you in 9 minutes.
Okay.
All right.
Hi, we were just wondering what the question was. Oh, okay.
Something like the implications of the gender norms on the parents.
Oh,
wait,
there it
yeah,
is. Okay, perfect.
the
Yeah.
implications. Take a picture of it.
Yes. Okay, perfect. I don't know if we can put this in the group chat. I'll put it in the group chat and see if people can see it. Okay, can you put me back in my group too?
Which one were you in?
Number 2. And actually, can you type it in the chat, Melissa? I think people could see it if you do it, maybe. If you send me and then I can do it.
Okay.
Okay, maybe. I'll write you and tell you if I see it.
You are already in room 2. You should just be able to go back to your room. So maybe go to the bottom 3 dots where it says more.
Oh yeah, breakout room. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Melissa, were they in the same groups they were in the first time or no?
Think so.
Okay, I'm looking now to see. I don't quite remember the order, but it looks like it. I'm only going to pick a couple because we only have like 20 minutes left. So
Okay.
um, let's do that. Let's do this. There we go. All right, people are back. All right, so I'm only going to pick a couple of groups this time just because we have like less than 20 minutes and I got about 5 more slides to go through, I think. So let's go with let's go with Aaron's group. So Aaron, Kelsey, Laura, Lene, and Tanya. So someone from that group, can you come off of mute and just talk to me about how you approach this question? Not all at once.
I don't mind talking again. I think the one thing that I think this is a thought-provoking question, I think, for our group, because all of us were talking about how, you kind of always hear about like, oh, you want your kids involved in sports and you want your kids involved in these community things to kind of help them not have some of the issues. So I guess what we were looking at for like the implications on the side of like maybe what the focus is for the communication for the sport. So like if you as a parent or if you're seeing a coach or other parents or something focusing on like, oh man, you got to go out on the football field and just destroy people. If that's the focus, then really kind of dialing that back and having better communication and better conversation about like, maybe this is an outlet for exercise, but not an outlet for trying to rip someone's head off type thing. But maybe we're kind of confused, because of the community construct side of it. So maybe we're missing the mark on it.
No, you're not. And you were thinking about it the right way. I want to chime in on it, but I don't want to. I'm gonna let the second group speak first, and then I'll come back to it. So, but you're thinking about it the right way, and the fact that you were struggling with it is exactly what I needed you to do. So, let's go to another group here. Let's go to room 5. So Eliza, Elizabeth, Ashley, Jasmine, the Sunby, and Shayna. Somebody from that group. How did you guys approach this question?
I can talk again. We talked about how it's complicated where even within your own household, you maybe don't have those messages or you don't perpetrate gender roles. But then once our kiddos go like out into the outside world, you can see how that influence is just so big. And so it's hard to be like the singular voice against like the multiple voice of everything else in the world with that. We also talked about how a lot of us have multiple boys, some that are even close in age, and how so many of their differences are just based upon the differences in their personalities and not like, oh, boys aren't emotional or boys don't show emotion this way or don't do that, where a lot of us, we have one son that is that way and one son that maybe isn't. So that's kind of just a perpetration of a stereotype that again, I think comes from, or we talked about kind of comes from those outside influences more so than like who we see our little boys at home before they get out into the world.
Yep. Yep. Both of you guys are right there. The point I want you to get from this implications are, as a parent, you have to be careful about where you allow your kids to socialize. You have to like really think through the point of it. And if they play football, if they get boxing or play rugby, some of these sports that tend to be a little bit more, physical, then you can't leave it up to boxing, rugby, or football to be the sole voice to them. You have to put what you're doing into perspective, right? It's a sport, it's actually like you have to put it in perspective, but also at the end of the day, you really got to look at the organization and see what the organization is about. How many of you remember the movie Karate Kid? Am I dating myself? So Karate Kid, remember you had the dojo boys, you had what is it, Kai something?
Cobra Kai.
Cobra Kai, and then you had Miyagi and Danielson, wax on, wax off, right? They both were martial arts, karate, but definitely Cobra Kai had a whole different persona, right? So the boys that tended to be a part of Cobra Kai, if they didn't walk in aggressive, they left aggressive because the sensei treat, like, you have to think about it like that. Like, hey, if I'm gonna put them on a football team, is there another team they can go to if this is not the right culture? Because this is going to teach them something totally different. That's what I'm saying, is that you have to, as a parent, the implications are you have to be careful about the environments that you place them in, to include the schools, to include the school context and culture. And being that this is parents' choice, you have a choice. All right. So let's keep going here before I run out of time. All right. So home stretch here. So there's this model called the masculine gender role strain that was started by a guy named Peck. And what he said was that the masculine gender role strain says that it explains that cultural standards for masculinity exist and that socializing encourages men to attempt to live up to them, encourages boys to live up to whatever the culture of whatever culture said that manhood is. And the culture is not like racial culture or those things. We're talking about the culture of your community, the culture of the country, the culture of your household. The existence of these standards can result in the perpetration of violence through two things. The reclamation model, where does the balloons come from? The reclamation model or the discharge model. Reclamation, reclaim, or discharge. Let's explore these. Under the reclamation model, men who attempt to meet gender role expectations but find that there's a gap. Like there's a gap between what I am and what my culture says that a man should be. And then you have this inability to attain the role because structural factors like race, class, ethnicity. This is what I'm talking about the American seasoning, right? So when you have a population, say Black and brown people, right, who have been subjected to institutional racism or structurals, and they are frustrated because the basic needs can't be met, dreams and aspirations can't be met, not because they're not trying, but because of social structures in the way, then they get angry and they get upset, and then they start to do things outside of what society expects them to do, right? They may sell drugs, they may get violent, they may, do a whole lot of things. And so now they have the inability to meet American seasoning. And so now they become deviant to society, that there's deviance theory that goes along with that. This also says that men may suffer from low self-esteem and other psychological consequences because of that. I can't meet this. So low self-esteem, psychological consequences, and may use violence to do what? To reclaim their masculine status. Reclaim their masculine status. When I think about this, I think about all the people who I've known to be drug dealers. And they have been smart, very intelligent, entrepreneurial, but they couldn't survive in America according to our social contract. Maybe they got in trouble, got locked up, and now they back out and they can't vote. So now I'm just, in society. That's why there are a lot of initiatives around the country that are fighting to get, like, once you serve your time, like, that shouldn't, if you're a felon, currently you can't vote. And so that leaves you out. You don't have a voice, right? Some jobs won't hire you. And so now you say, look, I still need to make $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. I'm only able to make 20 or 30 because of how America has categorized me, my community has categorized me. And so I'm going to go out and sell drugs. I know these stories to be true. Like, I know guys who are like, they're like, yeah, this is what I got to do to make it. And that's what they do. So that could happen because they're trying to reclaim their masculine status. Now, the other model, what we talked about, is the discharge model, right? So the discharge model refers to the negative or inadvertent impacts of trying to live up to expectations of manhood. Like, you're trying to do it, right? But you are suffering emotional trauma because that's not you, right? You're trying to adapt certain behaviors or attitudes, like you said, Jasmine, like, you have a boy that's emotional, and maybe there's one that's not emotional. So the one who is emotional tries to not be emotional and restrict themselves and say, I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to show my emotions because I'm a man. I'm trying to be a man. Then those are negative. That's a negative impact on him. But that happens as well. But all these things lead to violence because now he's upset. He can't be who he wants to be, all those things. And so now a way of dealing with that could be by using violence. So the discharge model and also the reclamation model are two ways that we look at this. Now, I'm going to read this, and I want you to read it with me. This is the last slide, actually, I think. And at the end of the day, what we have to be comfortable with is letting our boys know that it's okay not to be okay. Michael Kaufman said that the discharge of fear, hurt, sadness, for example, through crying or trembling, is necessary because these painful emotions linger on even if they are not consciously felt. Men become pressure cookers. The failure to find safe avenues of emotional expression and discharge means that a whole range of emotions are transferred into anger and hostility. Part of the anger is directed at oneself in the form of guilt. It could be self-hate and various psychological and physiological symptoms, stress, ulcers. Part is directed at other men, violence, and part is directed at women. So here's the conclusion, and here's the answer to the causes of male violence, more so than not. Both men's perpetration of intimate partner violence and youth peer violence appears to have a common root cause: perceived norms of masculinity. Perceived norms of masculinity. As a parent, this tells me that I have to watch the environment that we create at home. I have to be mindful of the environment that I'm putting my kid in school. I have to be mindful of the environment of whatever social activity that I'm putting them in, because there's benefits to that, right? You learn how to deal with people, soft skills, social emotional skills. And I have to be really mindful about how I'm defining masculinity to the young men in my life. Who am I exposing them to? So all those things are what lead or can be serious causes of what causes male violence. From your 7-year-old to your 77-year-old. My hope is that you walk away and you start to examine all the men in your life that are close to you and start to look at how they deal with things or how they show up and see if you can pinpoint why. if you can answer the question like why, instead of just judging them because of their outward manifestation of what they're holding on the inside. I think that's the challenge. Life gets so busy sometimes that doing that kind of deep analysis doesn't always come to you naturally. But I've told you, and you can't unhear what you've heard. You can't unlearn what you've learned. So it's there. So notes, whatever you've taken, and I hope you can reflect on this and walk away feeling, you know what, I can see things through a different lens now, and I can at least attempt to look at my kiddo in a more holistic way, or at least through another lens. So with that, with 2 minutes left, I's done. And are there any chats? Any questions in the chats? Let me open it up.
Yes, there's a question. I'll let you read it though.
Okay. And you know what? I mean, being that we're done, whoever asked the question can just come off mute and ask it.
So that was me. My question was, if we can pinpoint, like, okay, I can see why it is that you're reacting in this way and you're having this violence and this anger, especially with, let's say, like our older, 77-year-olds, how do we help reverse that? Because I feel like sometimes I know people can get super stuck in their ways and it's not our job necessarily to fix them, but if we can see it, then how can we help it?
Yeah. So there's a thing that I always look at things through, Elizabeth, and it's skill versus will, right? Do you have the skill to do it? And having the will to do it is something totally different. And you address each one of those things very differently, right? Skill is about, hey, you want to get better, here, let's do this, blah, blah, blah. But if they're not willing to do it, then unfortunately you can't make people do what they want them, which they don't want to do. But what it does is give you perspective on how to deal with the person.
Gotcha.
I think it takes away for me, the emotional baggage. Like I literally travel the country and the world having conversation with people about DEI and about race and about culture, blah, blah, blah. And as you can imagine, I come across folks who just totally don't agree with me. And they have a totally different perspective, and they'll try to tell me their perspective. And sometimes those things come across as very racist or very offensive. But if I'm in the space to have these conversations with you, what I can't do is get emotional. I have to figure out some way to remain objective so that I can hear where you're coming from. And because I have steeped myself in this knowledge and I had these conversations, I rarely get upset to the point to where I can't have an intelligent conversation with you. Like I more than likely can put myself in your position and understand where you're coming from.
Gotcha.
Based on where you're coming from. So I would say skill versus will. If it's skill, by all means, dive in. And there's, someone put something in the chat about bell hooks in her book. Like there's some things you can look in that. And then you have will, like they just got to be willing to do it.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else?
Sorry, just super quick. How do you recommend? I've been very honest with my boys. Look, I did these things really well. I did these things not so well. And so you're going to rock at those as a parent, but how do I, with my second son, who has we have a little bit more trouble with one another. How do I meet him where he's at as a 16-year-old young man and start to do some of that healing on his terms, right? I feel like part of the problem is I think maybe he thinks I keep doing what I think he wants me to do. You know what I mean? So how do I approach it from his terms,
Yeah. So unfortunately, I'm not gonna be able to give you like a super great answer on this because I would need to know exactly what's going on so we can have a more specific conversation. I am happy to have that conversation with you offline. You can follow up with an email. We can have a conversation when I get back. But I suspect there's some things that we can approach and we can try, but it's gonna have to be just what's the issue. Let's go from there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, Melissa.
Well, I want to jump in first. This is Deborah.
Hey, Deborah.
Hey. And I just want to say thank you for providing this type of information and knowledge for us to just do better. We do better when we know better. And everyone should have picked up at least one nugget, one tool that they can begin to do differently to work with their boys. Because sometimes we don't think hitting others and biting others and using our words are violent, but they are, and they then lead to other stuff. And so to curve that at a young age then helps to keep that from happening when they get older. So again, thank you. I know it's 3 a.m. where you are, so we certainly appreciate you staying up and hanging with us.